Hi guys, my name's Seb Tudor, I'm the man on the Silver Mountain and welcome back. Now today, it's another one of those videos. It's not a fun one, unfortunately, and as a result, I want to go through things quite systematically and make sure that there's understanding, especially considering that this is a very touchy subject that's been prevalent for a number of years, but also that's blown up over the last couple of weeks. Excuse me. And so, where I want to go with this is because we're talking about sexual harassment, the Harvey Weinstein stuff, how that's blown out beyond that, and kind of what we can learn from it and what we can take away from all of this. The first thing I want to do is define what we're actually talking about, because people use the words sexual harassment an awful lot. I'll get onto examples of how arguably I've seen it misused on numerous occasions. One very specific one, but the legal definition of harassment in regards to general harassment and sexual, racial, and whatever other harassment is the act of systematic and or continued unwanted and annoying actions of one party or a group, including threats or and demands. And so, with that in mind, let's take a look at the actual situation that's caused this to blow up more than anything else. So, if for those of you that don't know, Harvey Weinstein, a big producer and whatever else in Hollywood, he's done very well for himself. He's kind of quite a large name in the film industry, as it were, and reports have been coming out to one extent or another for a very long time about how this guy is basically either a sexual pest or a sexual predator, and this has all started coming to a head now because of just the volume of women that have addressed this. Now, as far as I'm aware, as far as I can find in the kind of research and in the news stories that I've done, I've taken a look at in regards to this. There are only two substantial cases that are being investigated by the authorities. One in London, and the other in, I believe, New York. I don't even think it's in LA. But as a result, those two situations are very apparent because they're actually being dealt with by authorities and they're being dealt with by the legal system, and they are supported by certain elements, including police stinger operations that have been conducted out against Weinstein, and several other kind of bits and pieces that have been floating around. Now, this, as a result, I'm fair, like from the investigations, from the evidence, from the actions that have been taken out against him by various people. I'm fairly convinced that he's probably done all of these things and he's a terrible human being. But the thing that stands out to me is the way that people have been addressing it, because it's not going to the authorities, getting these things reported properly, going and addressing these things directly. It's this lynch mob movement again, including individuals, some of which have been the most vocal, including and especially Rose McGowan, who has been very vocal and very aggressive in various different ways in regards to this on social media, including calling for the rest of the other members of the board of directors of Weinstein's company, including his brother, who fired him the other week, to resign when the level of awareness, involvement, collusion, whatever, is still not particularly apparent. But the other thing that stands out is that all of the things that she keeps saying are, as far as are legally concerned, are essentially null and void, because the case that she had with him went to court, was driven in that direction, and a settlement of $100,000 was reached between Weinstein and Miss McGowan, to, according to the legal documentation on it, to avoid litigation and buy peace. But this would have had to have been agreed to, in which case anything that she brings to the table is just hot air. It's just noise. It's not allowed to be included because it's a resolved case. Which is, again, a reason why individuals like Weinstein in these situations are able to get away with this stuff, because they just buy people off. You've essentially, through the kind of hardship that he may very well have put you through, you have signed yourself off for a certain amount of money, and as a result he can't be attacked. The other problem with investigating things like this is obviously in court, for the most part, eyewitness testimony isn't really admissible anymore, because it is highly fallible, and as a result, in regards to testimonies and things like that, they are scrutinized very substantially. And so as a result, with the situation around this, where most of these situations are taking place where it's behind closed doors, it's by himself with one other person, and that's kind of the way that it goes. It's almost, in some instances, he said, she said, and that's where authorities become less powerful. They because they need evidence to kind of draw things to a conclusion, and they might not have it for whatever reason. So in regards to the actual situation, I sincerely hope he gets put away for quite a substantial period of time, considering that we're looking at a history of actions and advances on numerous different people on repeated occasions over decades. And as a result, this fits very clearly with the legal definition of harassment, where it is systematic, where it is continuous, where it is kind of ongoing. And so this is where then I take a look at everything else that's spiraled out from this, especially in regards to the reactions to other men's comments on Harvey Weinstein, because apparently, especially Ben Affleck made some comments going, well, we all knew that he was kind of sexually promiscuous, but we didn't know to what extent that this was going on, which I can believe. You see him walking off with a different girl every kind of week, month, something like that, and there doesn't seem to be anything wrong with that just from the outset. Just someone walking off. I mean, it's someone else's life. You're not going to peer too much into it if it doesn't affect you. So I can understand how there are lots of people going, we didn't know, because they probably weren't looking. So, I don't feel like there's a big kickback on those people, or at least there shouldn't be. But the other thing that stood out was the other day, James Corden making jokes, and I'm no fan of James Corden. I'm not a big fan of his work generally. But he was making jokes at Harvey Weinstein's expense. He was literally attacking the man, ridiculing his behavior, mocking him, taking away his power, and bringing him down a peg in the things that he was saying. And yet various news outlets and, again, people on social media lashed out at him when he was demonstrating by pulling this guy down a peg that he was on their side. Why attack the people that are agreeing with you? That was just a bizarre thing to me. But then we've got the other people who are coming out, and I feel like that there are a couple of different instances here. We've got Hollywood, which is an industry that for the most part, at its core, hasn't changed in a very long time. Yeah? Agents are meat merchants. They are there literally just to farm people out that look the part, that sound the part. And then whatever happens after that, they don't care as long as they get paid. You've got a substantial number of people who are, regardless of how many other talents they have or whatever other things that they do, they are literally being put in roles because they are attractive because they can repeat lines, and that's it. You know, they're being put in these positions and being paid an awful lot of money for what they're doing, for for good genetics and a reasonable memory. You know, it's not a thing that stands out as having a really kind of solid screening system when the selection process is so shallow in the first place. Yeah. And so with the kind of area and world around that little subset of that one industry, you know, the fact that it hasn't changed in decades, the fact that the culture there is still very much dominated by the people at the top who have the money, who want to do all of these things, which is why we see movies that we love get turned into shit, and why we see actors and actresses getting kind of shuffled around and forgotten about and so on and so forth, regardless of how popular they are or how much people want to see more of them, just because of one movie that they were in not going so well or another. You know, it's a kind of, it's arguably similar to sport, you know, to professional sport, where up to a point the buying and selling between teams is basically a meat market. Who's got the best ratings, who's got the biggest appeal, and as a result we'll buy them up, put them on our team, and there you go. But then as soon as they hit a point where they're not winning anymore, as soon as they hit a point where, even if they're incredibly popular, a big celebrity, a big personality, if they're not doing the thing that the people at the top want them to do, then they're gone. You know, or they get shifted to one side into a different role as a coach, or taking over as some other kind of supportive role. And it's that shallowness in those environments that will drive this kind of thing, that leads people like Terry Crews to also come out and say that he has been groped right in front of his wife, and you know, it was essentially sexual assault to one degree or another. And it's the thing with the harassment side of things is that it may very well be deemed not systematic or continuous on one instance, and this is where the division is. If it's a single instance and it was not systematic, it was an on impulse thing where someone came up and groped someone else, then that's more a sexual assault situation, or more of that kind of area than harassment, as harassment is an ongoing kind of thing. But then moving outside of that, because there have been people who have been like, oh well, this happens in all kinds of industries, all kinds of places, and yeah, it does. But this is where I want to get into some more of what I've seen personally and what I've been party to one extent or another. And so in one of my older jobs, I was privy to 2 sexual harassment cases where I was an advocate for the member of my team that had been accused. And in both cases, those individuals lost their jobs. Now, the thing that stands out about these 2 cases is that in one case, quite legitimately, the guy was systematic, he was methodical, he was focused on a goal, and he went kind of continuously after this thing that he had in mind with this person. And as a result, when that got brought to light, as it got reported to an authority, he was removed. There was no question about it. In the other situation, though, an individual was accused. It was a guy being accused by a girl, and even just simply because the word sexual harassment had been brought up, and because of the misunderstandings around what that was, what that meant, how it should be dealt with, even though there was CCTV evidence demonstrating that he had done nothing wrong and that there was nothing involved in this that would constitute these things, for the sake of ease and simplicity, this individual was removed from their job as well. And this is where I find myself running into issues. Because in the corporate world, where power is involved as well, you have this problem where you've got people at the top who are just results focused for the most part. You've got individuals throughout the entire business who are, just there to live. And as a result, they will look for anything that they can to push things one way or the other. In which case, you have the people who are genuinely, especially from positions of authority or from level positions where they can impress themselves on other people, they are going to cause problems. They are going to interact in a negative way, be it by accusing each other or be it by kind of imposing themselves on others. It's an ongoing problem, and it will likely continue to be an ongoing problem because of how these situations play out. Now, in regards to the people who impose themselves on others, the way to deal with those people is to report them. But again, it should be a case of if you've told, if someone has come up to you and done something that you didn't like, then the first thing you should do is probably tell them that. Because if it's a one-off thing and it's that first instance where it's made you feel uncomfortable, then telling them that means that it won't turn into harassment, it won't turn into anything else if they're not meaning to do that. Because, as said, harassment is systematic, it's continuous, it's ongoing, it's regardless of whether you like it or not, they're going to keep doing it. And so if someone has come up and done something and it's made you, said something and it's made you feel uncomfortable, maybe talk to them and say, I didn't like that. But there's a good chance that they didn't understand, they didn't know. Yeah? If they meant it as a joke, if they meant it as whatever else, fine. But again, be an adult and talk to the individual about it. If it's something like groping you, or if it's something like kind of the, as said, already continuous behaviour, then yes, fine, report them directly. But there's the issue then of the people who make accusations when there was nothing there. The individuals who enjoy using the power that a victim is given to get their way more. And as a result, those people, firstly, they make it harder for everyone with a legitimate complaint. Because people with a legitimate complaint usually want the complaint made and then done with, which is another reason why people don't complain, because it's hard. It's a lot of reporting to people, reliving the experience, going through things again and again and again, just to make sure that their situation is dealt with properly. And that can be a really harrowing experience when you're going over it again and again and again. And so, that's one of the reasons why people don't report. The other problem is that people don't report because they are afraid, they have become afraid of the fact that either people will judge them for it, or they have got it into their head due to the zeitgeist that victims are never listened to, even though victims are very often listened to and given an awful lot of power and capacity to solve their issue. They have got it into their head that victims will not be listened to, and as a result they don't report because they feel it's hopeless. Now, I've a bit beyond the corporate side of things, I have seen this firsthand outside of corporate environments, in very much personal environments, and it's not pretty. Even my girlfriend, when we first got together, was being harassed by individuals, and what it came down to was making the report, going to the police. And this is the thing that I would take away from all of this. Firstly, social media and the lynch mob attitude of Me Too and everything else, that's all very well and good for demonstrating kind of support for one another, for whatever else, but there has to be the realization that you are never going to make a change purely by flailing around on social media, because nothing that goes up on social media is going to be taken as a direct report or a direct accounting of what's going on. And because of the volume of things that are there, no one is ever going to sift through all of that. So the way to tackle these kind of situations, both in a corporate and in a personal setting, is, first off, when it happens, anything that's happening around it, document it. Make a note, keep a record. Messages that are being sent to you, keep a record. Screenshots, hard copies, soft copies, whatever you can do to keep a log of what's going on. Because if you can provide that to the authorities with as a form of evidence, then rather unsurprisingly, even if you feel like you won't be listened to, which is bollocks, by the way, for the most part, as it has to be taken seriously by, at the very least, in most parts of the Western world, by law, it has to be taken seriously, and it has been only ever been a thing that has been promoted and escalated further over recent years with things like this blowing up more. The protections are being expanded. And this is regardless of whether you're a man or a woman or whatever it is. Keep a record, keep track of what's going on, have evidence, as many different types as you can. Obviously, if you've only experienced one area, like messages specifically, then, screenshotting those and keeping track of those and making sure that you haven't edited them, so that your responses are there too. The other thing is, don't engage with it, because if it becomes a to and fro, then it becomes a to and fro, and you're no longer the victim, you're a participant. Yeah, if you're a victim, then you're being acted upon, and the way to record that is to demonstrate that fact. So if you start attacking back, fighting back directly, instead of going through authorities, then when it comes to going to the authorities, then there is a good chance that you are not going to be listened to as much, because you've already taken it into your own hands to try and fight. Then moving on from that, it's actually go and make your complaint. If it's within a company, within a corporate structure where this person has authority or is of the same authority or whatever else has been going on, and they have it's through that interaction that they've been able to get you into the position where they can take advantage of you, then you need to make sure that you're properly bringing it to whichever authority is there. And only if it doesn't go beyond that should you really turn around and then just be like, right, well, I'm reporting this directly to the police, the authorities. Yeah, companies have their own directives, their own things like that for a reason. And I'm not talking about rape and sexual assault and things like that in this instance. I'm talking about continuous unwanted sexual advances. Yeah. And again, the thing is, you need to take it in context. If one person asks you out once and it makes you feel uncomfortable and you don't like them in that way and stuff, that isn't harassment. That's someone trying to ask you out and being rejected by you. If it's someone else, though, who is now asking you and pressuring you for the 50th time and cajoling you into it, then give it up. Go. That is the moment to not be kind of patient anymore, and that is the time to go and report. In which case, moving on from that, it's once you've made the complaint, once you've made the formal complaint against that individual, then you need to comply. You can't change a story, you can't have changed what's going on, you can't try and have more of a dig because you've suddenly been given that leg up, because you've suddenly got this support. You can't try and leverage that against them. You need to be as impersonal, and I realise this is the difficult part, you need to try and be as impersonal about it as possible, so that the people who are there to look after you, to protect you, to ensure that people who do wrong are kind of brought to justice for it. you need to try and remain as impartial and as impersonal as possible, so that it makes it easier for them to do their job. When they've got one person who's being emotional and aggressive and negative as they approach them with the complaint, it doesn't make it any easier for them when you are also emotional and negative and trying to leverage them against someone else. Because that is, again, where time gets wasted. It's where you've got people who may very well have brought a lot of evidence, but then trying to get through the evidence, trying to generate a timeline, trying to generate enough that will satisfy law courts as far as convictions and things like that are concerned, convincing managers and people who are in positions of authority that are there to deal with the situation within workplaces, HR departments, all that kind of thing. If you're not being professional, if you're being very emotional, very invested, very kind of aggressive with the way that you want it solved, whilst they are trying to do their job, then it doesn't make it any easier. And so when it comes to the last part of what I want to say here, it's it has to be a legitimate complaint. Every single one of these women who have brought it against Harvey Weinstein have a legitimate complaint, because it's continuous, it's persistent, it's very much the same every time. Even from person to person, it seems to be very, very similar, very, very much the same. But when it comes to like one person coming up and touching you on the arm and it causing you maybe to feel uncomfortable, but instead of asking them not to do that, you run straight to your boss and make a complaint against that person, in which case that person loses their job and their livelihood and whatever else, purely because you didn't like one momentary interaction that may never have happened again. It comes down to, keep in mind, the persistent, the continuous, the actually harming. Yeah? Because otherwise, the only way to solve this problem is to completely separate out men and women from basically interacting within workplaces, which is something we strived to not do for decades, so that everyone is treated equally and evenly. And yet now, especially in an industry where men and women aren't treated evenly and equally because of their roles within what they're doing, it's a case of, is it any wonder that this is where we're seeing this stem from? But in most other industries, we have had continuous growth and change and development in the last few decades. And so, taking this seriously and going and making a report, going and making sure that you have evidence, that things are taken in context, that one upsetting moment isn't then taken as a world-shattering event unless it has caused genuine harm. Someone coming up and making an off-colour joke, or in regards to the two of you, or whatever else, in the moment, once, is something that should be addressed with that person, maybe, but otherwise is not harassment, is not anything like that. And so it's that definition of systematic and continuous that needs to be taken into account with these complaints. Because I've seen a couple of people, women, who have come out and said there are these people who are making jokes in this regard, and it was something that I didn't enjoy, I didn't like, and it was of a sexual nature, and it directly impacted me. And yet I asked them to stop, and they stopped. In which case, that's not harassment. That's them being childish or not understanding the dynamic between us, and then having a greater understanding of it. I've seen those people online making these kind of reports and giving their take on these things when they have also been legitimately harassed, and they're trying to draw the contrast as well. I've seen those people get shouted down, and it's like there's the situation with the reports and the catching these people and bringing people that act this way to justice, and preventing harm to people. And then there's the other side of this, which is purely political. You know, the victimhood leveraged. And I'm not, you know, in regards to the Harvey Weinstein situation, in regards to the various people, other actresses that have come out about other situations, Jennifer Lawrence, Reese Witherspoon, and some of the others, you know, fine. I'm not saying that I don't believe those people. In fact, I'm inclined to believe those people because of the industry that they're discussing. You know, same with models that have come out and said the same, people that have come out and said the same of certain other areas like sport and stuff like that. I can't remember the name of the American Olympic gymnast whose coach had been continually preying on the young girls on the US team for 10 years or something. You know, those people need to be brought to justice, need to be caught, and the only way that happens is through reports. Mob justice, lynch mobs don't work anymore. Social media justice just doesn't exist and can't be admissible in part of the system without like proper recording and filtering and things like that, which take time, which take an awful lot of focus, unless they have got the help from the people who are making the complaints. You know, and those complaints need to be properly made. So, whilst these situations are miserable, and I have no doubt that they still exist, and I have been privy to some of these situations, there is a way to go about making the complaints, solving the problems, and online mobs that are being supported by individuals who have already basically been written out of the entire story, they're not the solution. The solution is we already have a system in place and it already works. But you need to take advantage of it. You know, prevention is better than a cure. And so going to, with as much as you have to make a complaint, to use the system to prevent further hardship, to prevent other people suffering, is so much better than after all of these people have suffered at the hands of Harvey Weinstein or the doctor that was in charge of the Olympic team or whatever, whoever else. You know, you have to look at this and go, well, at the moment they're trying to cure a situation that's already been and gone. Yeah, you're going to stop some more into the future, but for the most part, these people are seeking vengeance rather than seeking to prevent further. To prevent further would be the first time this happened, the second time this happened, the first 2 or 3 women going and dealing with it directly, straight away, instantly, going straight to the people in charge, and if he was the one that was in charge, going straight to the police. Yeah? With as much evidence and other things as they could possibly handle. Now, in the past, 20 years ago, you know, that may very well have been harder to do due to the lack of evidence that we carry around with us all the time. But nowadays, we've got mobile phones, we've got all of this other technology that we're using to record our lives as much as we're using it to communicate with each other and everything else. And yes, this is where this social media thing comes from, because it's easier to pull your phone out of your pocket and join the crowd rather than stand out from the crowd and make follow the path of kind of difficult reliving of your situation, but of solving your problem. But anyway, guys, let me know what you guys think. You know, as said, I've seen this from both the in work side and from the personal side. Both times I've been a spectator, I've seen the vulnerability of the people involved, the people that have been victimized, the people who have been doing or allegedly doing, in some instances, the things that have caused the complaint. I have seen both how victimhood is leveraged and how victimhood has not been taken advantage of to the extent that they should be. And you know, that seeing these stories, especially seeing the daft stuff around attacking comedian James Corden for making some jokes in support of those people who don't like Harvey Weinstein anymore, you know, it's troubling. because the people who are there to help are going to be the other people that are around you, the other people in your industry, the other people who work with you, the other people who are your friends and loved ones, and the authorities that we trust our safety to every day. If you're not willing to work with any of those people, if you're not willing to discuss it with friends and family, if you're not willing to help them let them help you make complaints, if you're not willing to report it to your boss or to the HR department or anything like that, if you're not willing to go to the police and deal with them directly, then you are by yourself, and posting it on social media and going "me too" to feel less alone is just letting these people that have done this stuff to you get away with it. But anyway, guys, as said, I'd love to hear your experiences as much as you're willing to share them. I realise this is a tough subject to go over, and that's why I've been vague as well in regards to the things that I've been saying, because the people that are involved have either been dealt with to one extent or another, or are so far gone from the situations that I've been referencing that hopefully that isn't part of their mindset anymore. But either way, guys, I'd love to hear what your thoughts are about both the big situation that has made this bubble up, the false reporting, the accurate reporting, the people not reporting, anything that I've been talking about today. I'd like to hear from your additional perspectives. But anyway, guys, thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you in the video tomorrow. Take care. Thank you very much for watching, guys. If you found it at all interesting, then please drop us a like, share this video, and subscribe for more, and I'll see you in the video tomorrow. Take care.